Carville seems like a kind of guy that is.
I think I could sit and listen to him just talk about shit he knows.
And you got to pay attention, otherwise you're not going to understand shit.
Yeah.
That.
I think maybe a Cajun thing I'll furnish them by my. I mean, it's just sex.
Yeah,
It does sex.
Maybe Cajun thing, but just sex.
He didn't have an erotic.
I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying.
He didn't have an erotic thought in his mind.
Yeah. And then 80-year-old don't have no business being president.
I'm sorry, I don't care who y'all can't do that job.
Yes. Hey everybody, and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore, and I'm joined by Scott Melson. Hello.
What's up, dude?
Just the two of us today. All of our guests canceled.
We are all on our lonesome.
It's a rainy Friday afternoon, and we are excited to be here. I told Scott, I've been excited all week to record today. I don't even know why.
I mean, are you not excited to record every week?
I am, but particularly
but this week is different.
Yeah, and it's been all week. Last night, as you know, I was at the My Favorite Murder live podcast with all the other murderinos out there, and we are not that fancy.
No, to say the least.
Because Stay Sexy and Go Vote does not have the same ring to it as Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered.
I mean, I think it's a nice catchphrase, but
it's a little...
We also didn't start our podcasting career on Ellen, so...
Is it Ellen? SNL?
They've both done different things.
So my wife, who is a diehard murderino, told me that I've only listened to a few episodes, but she said that on My Favorite Murder, they've said something about fix this several times, and she keeps meaning to tell me about it or write them a letter or something. We would love to do a crossover podcast.
Yes, if the My Favorite Murder folks are listening.
Georgia, if you're listening, I would love to be on your show. We can talk about political murders.
There's plenty.
Ooh.
There's plenty. You know, we discussed this via text, our never-ending text string a couple weeks ago, the idea of a true crime political podcast.
I think there's room for it.
Would you guys listen? Give us a shout out if you would listen. Would you listen to that too?
Or tell us to stop.
Well, or there's that.
So, Scott, before we got going today, we're drinking whiskey as usual, but we did try some very old wine that we had... it was probably 3 months old.
At least.
We both were curious. What's your take?
And it was, I mean, the thing is, it was a good bottle of wine when we opened it. Somehow it never got finished. I don't know how that happened. It did.
You could peel paint with that shit.
It proved
degrease an engine.
Yeah, that's right. And it proved that you can't age wine once the cork is out.
No, indeed.
Wine can age well when the cork is in, but once the baby comes out, you're
not even once the baby comes out.
It's not good.
It gets sour, apparently.
Yes.
Doesn't. This baby smells like vinegar.
Stings the nostrils.
All right, well, let's... two quick announcements. I'm going to do these announcements up front. One, there's a chance I'll get this posted tonight on Friday night, and so you might hear this before Saturday evening. Tomorrow, on May 4th, we're having our prom, our A Night to Remember.
All of you should come.
Adult prom. If you're not coming already, you should definitely come if you hear this. If you're listening to it after May 4th at 7 p.m., you missed the boat, and it was a rocking time. I'm certain of it. Well, I guess next week we'll give an update.
There are still tickets available, yes?
There are, yes. Let's fix this. OK.org/prom. Secondly, next week on May 8th, Wednesday, May 8th, is our next Capitol Day, and this is a joint Capitol Day with OICA, the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy. It is Child Advocacy Day at the Capitol. We've partnered with them the last 2 years. This will be the third year in a row that we're going to partner with them. Super excited. It's at the Capitol. Go to oica.org for all the details. You can register on there. There's a lunch. It's free, but there's a requested or suggested donation. The lunch is at the, I don't know what it's called, but the governor's pool house, basically. It's at the governor's mansion next to the Oklahoma-shaped pool.
Are you going to be able to cross that item off your bucket list?
To jump in the pool?
Oh, I thought it was just a jump. I thought it was just a selfie with the Oklahoma-shaped pool.
No, I want to be in the pool. I want to have like a pool party.
Oh, you should do that.
We need to talk to Governor Stitt. Surely there's some way we can get to... Can we rent the pool?
Ooh.
Holy moly.
There's a revenue stream for the legislature.
rent it out.
Put it into GR.
Well, but I wonder if you could rent it out like you can other parts of the Capitol or the governor's mansion.
I mean, that's a great question.
All right, listeners, I'm going to look into this. If we can reserve the Oklahoma pool for a pool party, my body is not beach ready, but
I'll man the grill.
ooh, there we go.
I'll-
Man, like a cookout?
Yeah, dude.
I think Governor Stitt would be in for this.
I think he would actually be into it.
I bet we can get Light Gov Pennell to join us as well.
Oh, he's already in, right? Like,
Do you think McCall would come? What color swimsuit does McCall wear? Surely it's black.
no, I think it's a neon green Speedo.
No, please don't say that. Oh, I'm scarred already. He just strikes me as someone who has like very long like black board shorts.
Yes,
He's very solemn.
It's not a like Hawaiian style board shorts with like like pine trees.
No.
Or palm trees.
No, he's not. Yeah, he's not like not like James Bond in
What if
GoldenEye.
what if he totally like cuts loose? What if Speaker like shows up to the party and has like aviators and a ball cap and like
his hat's on backwards.
hats on backwards and drinking a beer?
Hello, gentlemen.
I was just gonna
Welcome
do
to
it.
my party. If you haven't listened to his interview on, is that News
Well,
Okay?
What you have to understand is that the process for this is quite complicated.
If you haven't watched or listened to the News Okay podcast from 2 weeks ago, I think when he was on, you should.
Just for that.
Ben, who I love, needed to ask the speaker politely to scoot back from the mic, just a hair. It was very intimate.
Would you say he was right up on it?
yes, I would.
He was right up on it.
All right, so on that note, let's get into the news here. So we're gonna do a little out of order today, but at this point in the legislative session, we're in May, which is the final month of session. So most bills, Scott, have made it through both chambers. Most bills.
Well, I would say most bills that are going to make it through, right? Like if it's going to be signed into law, what's the best way to put it? Because we started with almost 3,000 bills, right? So I'd actually say,
right,
and we're down to 250. So I'd actually say most bills
okay.
did not make it through.
This is a comparative mathematic
yes,
question.
right,
Yes,
right.
yes.
It's like so most bills did not make it through, but we have some that are still alive and kicking.
Yeah. The bills are either disposed of or have largely passed. But now we're down to just a couple of things. The bills that are still alive are they've either been passed and signed, they've been dismissed, or those that are still alive.
Well, so there's four things, right? So either it's passed through the process and been signed into law, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is like dead essentially. For this purposes of this exercise, we're going to ignore zombie bills, right?
DED, dead.
Right. It's passed and done and it's through. It's dead and it's not going anywhere. It passed the House, passed the Senate, and is awaiting the governor's signature. Okay.
Right.
It passed its chamber of origin, went to the other chamber where it was amended. Okay. Those amendments, those bills then come back to the chamber of origin.
Right.
The amendments were rejected, and those bills go to conference.
Right. So that's what I was trying to say is bills that they haven't agreed on wording for somewhat, and they've got to go to conference and work that out.
Or there's...
But they've been vetoed. You didn't say that.
That's
five.
veto.
Some have passed the process, but then were vetoed by the governor.
Yes. And then last but not least, there is JCAB. That's it. The Joint Committee on Appropriation and Budget. I
spent a lot of time this afternoon trying to come up with a witty secondary wording for JCAB, and I didn't really get anything.
So the best I can say is I have tried for 3 years now to understand exactly how JCAB works, and I still don't entirely get it.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the process of arranging someone who understands the intricacies of JCAB to come on the show and explain it to us. They were going to be here today and were unable to make it, but I think they may be on the books for next week.
It's their mother's birthday.
It is their mother's birthday. So
Representative Bennett,
yes.
happy birthday
To
to
your mom.
Mrs. Bennett.
Yes.
So JCAB is a wily beast, and it's tricky.
It's essentially there are appropriations bills that go through. So JCAB is the Joint Committee on Appropriations and Budget. So there are
Joint meaning people from both chambers.
Yes, House and Senate. They are appointed by their leadership. JCAB has, as I understand it, several like kind of sub things too, right? There's like isn't there like a JCAB, like the education like subcommittee and the like, or is that just the regular appropriations committee?
I think it's just regular.
So maybe JCAB is just one thing. I don't really understand why there are certain bills that go through JCAB and certain bills that don't. I also don't fully understand, like, they file all these JCAB shell bills at the beginning of session.
Right.
And it seems to me they can be used for, like,
anything.
Damn near anything.
Which is funny that they file them at the beginning because the leadership, the speaker and the pro tem can file bills at any point anyway. So, like, they could just wait and then be like, okay, here's the general appropriations bill.
Right.
So there are rules.
I think
then there's the legislature.
Yeah, I think Wily Beast is probably the best term for JCAB, but we are going to do our best to get Representative Bennett, who sits on JCAB, to come and explain it to us.
We need some dedicated JCAB music. Think on that. I was going to play like...
What's the most confusing music that you have?
Well, I don't have any loaded up right now, but I was thinking something that involved the word money, Pink Floyd or one of those. But I think there are
money.
Yeah, that one too. But I think if you want confusing, we could find some kind of strange polka music. That's probably a better music, right? Some kind of polka option.
I don't know. I feel like polka is very straightforward. What we need is like a fugue, some like Baroque fugue that has like four different melodies that then like get stuck together.
Right. There's that episode on Parks and Rec where they have their public radio station and they're playing jazz on jazz on jazz, and it's like we play 3 jazz songs all at the same time, and it just sounds terrible.
Why don't we get a recording of Duke Silver? Duke Silver can be our JCAB music.
That's the opposite. Duke Silver is the opposite of JCAB. That is indeed a smooth, illustrious music.
It's been 15 minutes. Have we said anything yet?
Nothing. Not a damn thing. All right, so let's get into, since it is May and it's talking about JCAB, it's officially Budget Watch 2019.
We need Budget Watch music too.
We do need Budget Watch music. All we have is this. That's all I've got. And so Budget Watch, a few years ago, I did a video every day for like 40-something days about the budget. I'm not going to do that this year, but here's where we're at.
Hopefully this year you won't have to.
Hopefully. We may be done. I mean, there's a chance we could be done.
Knock on wood, my friend. Knock on wood.
What's your prediction?
Sunny Die?
Yeah.
May 15.
15.
Well, so actually that gets a little bit hard.
No,
because
just give me your damn prediction and quit.
No, I am setting parameters.
Prediction.
I'm pulling a Nate Silver on you. I'm not just going to give you a number. So I think that the House will be done by May 15. I think that Sine Die will be later because the Senate has lots of confirmations they have to work through. So
true.
So what I think will happen is that the House will stand at ease or in recess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not at ease. The House will stand in recess. The Senate will keep meeting and doing confirmations, and they'll Sine Die like May 24th.
Really?
Yeah.
I was gonna say the 17th at 5:30 p.m.
No, they'll do it. They'll do it earlier than that. They got to get to happy hour.
I don't think so. I mean, they could, but that's a Friday. I think they'll. Well, yeah, maybe 16th at 5:30, late on Thursday, and not come back. I'll let me amend. I'd like to motion to amend to May 16th at 5:30.
Denied.
Well, suck it, Trebek. I'm going to make a note here. Andy, May 16th at 5:30. Scott says...
May 24.
Scott, May 24th. All right, we'll visit this in subsequent weeks. So this week, related to the budget, the Oklahoma House Democrats released their budget called A Brand New State. It's a piece of paper I have here where I printed it out so we can look at it. Scott, does this budget say much?
I mean, yes and no. Like on the one hand, it's a nice proposal, right? Like these are all things that I would agree with. I think that they're all things that, I mean, for the most part, this is a document that takes a series of proposals that Dems have been advocating for a long time and kind of like coalesces it into a singular proposal. So they talk about 5 things. So first, they've got criminal justice reform. So they want to fund district courts. So basically give the district courts $40 million to stop relying on fines and fees. They want to fund DAs to the tune of another $40 million so they can stop relying on fines and fees. They want to provide some money for the Pardon and Parole Board, because the Pardon and Parole Board does not have a full, like they don't have full-time members right now. They want to give a pay raise for the Departments of Corrections for DOC. They don't say how much. They would like to give fund OSBI $2 million for testing backlog rape kits. This is actually, so that sidebar, that is a huge issue that we have not really talked about on the show,
right.
And we could really spend an entire episode going into that, and I think we should. And then in the future,
Floyd.
yes. Yeah. But so they're going to fund that, and they would like to give $17 million for better defense practices for the accused. So that's their criminal justice reform. They would like to, for the rural districts, give $90 million for county roads and bridges, a state employee pay raise, expand the EITC, Earned Income Tax Credit, which will help families across Oklahoma save about $121 million. They would like to eliminate the capital gains exemption that we've talked about before, but they'd like to provide an agricultural exemption to that. So if your capital gains come from farming with certain kind of parameters, that would not, like, that would still be exempt. And they would like to expand Medicaid to help out rural hospitals. Education, there's really nothing I feel like new in education. We've talked about $1,200 teacher pay raise, $200 million into the funding formula.
I was going to encourage you not to read every bullet point here.
Stop it.
Stop it.
A slew of other options that you can read at your leisure. Okay.
Leisure.
And then healthcare. There are several things in healthcare, but the big cheese, as it is in healthcare, is to bring $1 billion into healthcare home from the feds by expanding Medicaid. So that's a brief-ish outline of what they talk about. All things that I think are like worthy, but many things that I think are, there are things in this budget that are already in the works, like the teacher pay raise and Medicaid expansion to some degree. There are things that are non-starters, like eliminating the capital gains exemption.
And a $10,000 bonus to all nationally board certified teachers.
Yeah, like there's just like, I mean, it's like I don't feel like there's anything like necessarily bad, but it just.
No, right. No, I think. So 2 things. Well, first of all, we will put I put their proposal on a Word doc, and it'll be on the blog post. So listeners, if you want to review this yourself, you can look on Twitter, or you can go to our blog for this episode. I think here's my beef with budget proposals like this. And this is the only one we saw this year, aside from like what the governor put out earlier this year. But like 2 years ago, every Tom, Dick, and Harry had a budget proposal. Hell, we had one that year with the
we did.
SOS Coalition. What was different, I will say, about our SOS budget, as I recall from this, is that while this one has some numbers, they're all round numbers, 40 million, 17 million, 121 million, stuff like that. It's some of them also just say fund a state employee pay raise without a budget number to it. I would argue this is not, and they say it's a budget proposal, but I would say that, like, I would just love to see an actual, like, put out the full thing. Like, how much, if you're going to propose a budget, put out all the numbers. I like completeness.
I think that's a reasonable.
No one would read it.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think, and that's the point, right? Like, this is like budget proposals like this. They are inherently and they're intended to be. They're political documents, right? Like it's
that's true.
Like that's what
not
this
a
is.
Working document.
Yeah, this is something like this is not meant to be a model bill. This is something that is essentially a set of talking points that all have to do with the budget, which is fine.
Well, maybe it's a more budget priorities than it is a budget proposal.
Yeah. I think they call it brand new. They call it the brand new state budget proposal.
That's brand new state.
Gonna make
keep
you
it
great. Yes. That's enough of that. No, I think that this is. I mean, I think it's fine. I think that this is a budget that you campaign on, less than a budget that you like can try to govern.
Oh, that's
on,
interesting.
Particularly when you have 24 seats in the House and 9 seats in the Senate, and there are no elections this year.
So I said that to someone today that in fact, I'll pull up my text message. I really feel like I get the Dems just have a hard space right now. You know, I feel like the Democratic caucus in both chambers is so neutered this year by their small size that like they, in some ways, we talked about this earlier in the session, they're unable to really stand for anything. Their positioning has often been just opposing whatever the Republicans propose, right? Like we are against you on that. The problem is that the Republicans have proposed some really reasonable things, and the Dems are like, "Damn it!"
Well, I mean that's
a good idea,
right? So you talk here, like, so they talk about funding district courts and district attorneys. So this is something that we're going to talk about in a minute that Governor Stitt has made a priority. Now, I don't know if it's to the tune of $40 million, but it's something that they want to do, right? Funding county improvements for roads and bridges. I don't know if that's something that the R's are into. $1,200 teacher pay raise plus $200 million in the funding formula. From what you and I are hearing, numbers really close to that are probably going to be in the final budget, right? Like those are both proposals that are probably going to happen. So, I mean, the $10,000 bonus to national board certified teachers. I don't think that's going to happen.
Right.
They say fund higher ed for $50 million. I think the numbers we've seen are more like 20. But higher ed is going to get some more money this year. And then in terms of the healthcare, the big thing is Medicaid funding. So like, there's a lot here that is already in the process, like is already happening to some degree.
Right. And I think that's the case every year where both parties largely agree on things. And I think many of these things are similar to what the governor proposed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so it stacks up pretty well. The question that I wrote on our episode notes is, does this proposal really matter?
No.
Negative.
No. And again,
because the party has no power, they don't need the Democrats at all to pass a budget.
They don't. And I mean, I think, you know, on the one hand, like, I don't want to be overly harsh on the Dems. Like, I think that this...
No, their small numbers mean they have an uphill battle anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just... I'm not critical of anything that they've proposed here. I just... Is it newsworthy?
No.
Is this newsworthy?
Again, no, but it comes back to what you said. It's a political document. Why not put this out?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't hurt anything, really. I don't think this hurts the caucus. It doesn't hurt the cause.
No.
And in some ways, maybe it helps. So, yeah. So, from what I've heard, rumor has it that the House and Senate have already agreed and have a budget done.
Yeah.
And they have sent it to the governor's office for review. Now, Scott, what strikes me funny about this is that in years past, historically, the budget is a legislative document that they pass, and the governor signs it or doesn't, right? It's yes or no.
Yeah.
And he can line item veto it, and they can come back and decide if they want to overturn that veto or whatever, right? But somewhere around, I believe Governor Keating started getting involved in the budget process. He doesn't actually the governor's not designed to have to be on equal footing with the legislature. And yet here we are where the House and Senate have done it. They've sent it to Stitt. I'm sure because they don't want it to be vetoed.
Well, he is designed to be on equal footing with the legislature.
Well, but the budget is really like a legislative document that they pass and he either says yes or no, but not involved in the negotiations the same way. I think that's a relatively new thing in terms of the whole life of the state.
That's really interesting. I don't know about that. We know, for instance, that I would say at the federal level, that's not the case, right?
Well, that's how it's designed at the state level too.
Like the federal level, it is designed. I mean, by design, the executive branch is intimately involved in the crafting of the budget and should be, I would say, because what you don't want to have, right? Like if you're the House leadership and the Senate leadership, you don't want the two chambers to spend 3 months crafting a $20 billion budget or whatever the budget for the state of Oklahoma is, right? I guess they appropriate $7.
Yeah.
You don't want to spend 2 or 3 months crafting a $7 billion budget, and we're all on the same page, and then the governor vetoes it, and oh crap, we don't have 68 votes in the House and 37 or whatever it is in the Senate.
2/3, right? Yeah, but
To
there's some
override
other,
the veto,
other
right?
problems endemic in that, I think. But it's just funny that it's like, okay, we did this, and now they're gonna like pre-ask him on that, as opposed to, and this is a political statement, is just to send him the budget and say, boom, this is what we passed. What do you do? And then it's up to him, and then he can either sign it or not, or line item veto things and risk being the bad guy in certain issues.
Sure. There's also something that's markedly different, though, this year than has been the case for at least the last 4 and probably the last 8 years.
What's that?
Who do you think has more political capital right now?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I honestly don't know. So from what I've heard this week, I think we talked last week that, maybe the week prior, that the House and Senate weren't getting along, right? That like mom and dad weren't seeing eye to eye on everything. And
I hate it when they fight.
I know. Well, and that's been true. So like Senator McCourtney, friend of the pod, sent, he had, 7 medical marijuana bills that he authored in the Senate. They went to the House, and his co-chair of the joint working group on medical marijuana, John Eccles, also a friend of the pod, when he, as the floor leader, he only heard, I don't think he heard any of them on the House side. So like, they're on the same committee. McCourtney authored these bills, sent them to the House. Eccles, his co-chair, was like, no. And so
and Eccles had some bills that didn't get heard in the Senate.
Yeah. And the speaker's like train delay fine bill didn't get heard and all this. So like, there's a lot of, it's just a pissing contest, right? It's not about actual issues. They get upset about petty things like, you didn't hear my bill.
Sure. And that's just human nature, right? But like, I also think though that like right now, I think it can be. If you're the kind of person that seeks political office, like by definition, you have an ego, right? Like if you run for something,
the third time I've had this conversation today.
Yeah, actually. It's like if you run for something, you have an ego, right? So I would say actually, so the kind of way I think about this particular one is 2 things. One, right now we know from what we hear that there is a substantive difference between what the legislature wants to do and what the governor wants to do. Well, right? The legislature the legislature has zero interest in taking $200 million of new revenue and sticking it in the savings account, which is one of the things that the governor campaigned on. So that's a significant point of difference between the 2 branches. In addition to that, I would say that right now, if you were talking about who is more popular, the House and the Senate and their leadership, or Governor Stitt, I don't think there's any question. I don't have polling data on this, but I don't think there's any question that Governor Stitt is the more popular political figure, right? And also has the bully pulpit, right? So I think if you are the Senate leadership and the House leadership and you guys come to agreement, I think that you are very wise to send the governor your budget and get his input beforehand, because I think if the governor, I think it's entirely possible that if the governor vetoes the budget and says, we are turning around Oklahoma, it is time that we tighten our belts, it's time that we put money in our savings account.
Right here,
you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think there's a large segment of the population for whom that sells.
Right.
And I think that he has political capital, right? If his approval rating, if he does that and his approval rating drops 15 points, I bet he's still plus 50, which is all you need.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right?
But at the end of the day, the political capital matters less than the votes in the chambers, right? Like there's a chance, and I can't predict how it would necessarily go down, but they could pass a budget that is reasonable to both sides. He vetoes it, or line items vetoes a few things, more likely, and they come back and just override his veto, and then that sets up the next 3 years as already contentious.
Right.
I would predict.
Well, I mean, you can do that, but that also comes with a risk itself, right? Do you override the veto of a governor who is more popular than you are in your own district?
Yes, because they have egos.
I mean, maybe you do.
I would wager, my hunch is there are people in the legislature who are experienced political people who felt like they gave the governor a lot, right? They gave him control of these 5 agencies, and the bills that he has vetoed, and I may have this on the list for later, but some of the bills that he has vetoed thus far have been bills that would establish boards, commissions, that kind of thing, where it would give him some power, and he's said, we're not going to do that because I want to do it my way. And the legislature is upset or increasingly irritated with him because they feel like he's overstepping his bounds on power.
Sure.
So it's funny to me in some ways because they're like, he's like, I need more power. They're like, yeah, here's some power. And he's like, yes, but I need more power. And they're like, well, hang on, buddy.
So I'm gonna tell you a little story, and it's
Tell us.
it's
Uncle Scott.
It's not exactly analogous, but I think it's similar. There once was a young politician. He was the governor of his state. He was quite popular. He had to resign in disgrace because he lied about a hiking trip. But even after that, he ran for Congress and he won. He was quite popular in his congressional district. Then there was a presidential election and a new president took office. And this young congressman disagreed with some of the things that the president did and said and how he did them and said them. And he was very outspoken about that in his disagreements. In 2018, he lost, and now he doesn't have a job.
Well, I'm sure he has a job somewhere.
Well, not an elected office.
Okay.
No, this happened to Mark Sanford, right? Like, Mark Sanford went against President Trump in South Carolina several times on several big issues, went toe-to-toe. President Trump went to his district, campaigned against him, and he lost. Now, again, that's not 100% analogous.
Right.
But, like, I think that if you are in a district where the governor is significantly popular and you go to toe-to-toe with the governor against him, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that you might be vulnerable to an electoral challenge. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe state politics don't work that way.
Well, it's reasonable. It's possible, right? But like, I don't know that it's possible. You look perplexed.
I do, because I feel like I don't hear myself talking.
Is your wiggle the cord?
Yes, I hear you talking.
Wiggle. Oh, well, maybe you're just speaking so loudly you don't hear it. I hear you just fine.
You turned me down.
You were yelling into the microphone, and I had to compensate.
He turned me down.
This is the rule. Listeners at home don't know this, but I have complete control of our mixer board right here.
He does. He's like the governor.
I'm like the guy.
He wants all the power. He has all the power.
I can make it very echoey.
It's fortunate he has all the power because I don't know how to work any of the things that he has.
I just wiggle a few knobs. That's what she said.
I thought you said it. I don't know. That's my take on this, and I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens with the vote. I think that ultimately, I think this will be much ado about nothing. I think that the House, the Senate, and the governor are all going to be in agreement before anything is finally done.
Well, they have to be.
Yeah.
And I think what's going to happen is that right now, so allegedly, House and Senate have sent the budget to the governor, and so they could be done next week if he would sign it. My hunch is he will come back with a few things. They'll have to work that out. It'll take. So next week is the 5th through the 9th, right? And so they'll do that. They'll pass it. As you said, they've got some Senate confirmations to do. I think they'll bump those through next week into the week after, and then they'll be done on the 16th. I can't imagine this takes more than roughly 2 weeks from yesterday. I think they'll be done.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
What I've been hearing is they were saying 16th, 17th, and then I think they were saying the 10th first, which they always undershoot that, and then their estimates of their end date is like me estimating my golf score.
No, I think they'll be done legislating even before you said. Like, I think they'll be done legislating by the 14th or 15th. I don't think they're going to be done with confirmations by then.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk about criminal justice reform. Ooh, I hit the wrong button. That was a good...
I was like, why is there a fanfare? The Kentucky Derby is tomorrow, but...
Wow, well, I'm ahead of the game. All right, for real, though, a quick break. You know, if people watch this video, they get to see us dance during the interludes.
That's sad for them.
Speaking of dancing, man, tomorrow's prom.
Sorry, Bo.
I'm
Sorry,
pumped.
Bo.
Yeah, I almost texted Bo about coming today, but I didn't. So that's the end of that.
Sorry, Bo.
Scott, where are we on criminal justice reform? It's been a big issue this year.
Yeah, it really has. So there's been a lot that has been done. I think that there is a lot still to be done. There's a nice piece in the Tulsa World this week. We'll post it on the blog about the governor came out on Wednesday with a criminal justice reform package, several things that he would like to see in criminal justice reform, like things that need to be done still. This really comes down to 6 things. So specifically, he wants to see a new funding structure for the DAs in the court system. So,
which is on the Dems budget, and everyone agrees, right?
Yeah. So like right now, essentially, the DAs and the district courts, they receive their funding from fines and fees that are levied against defendants and what do you call somebody that's been convicted? A defendant,
convict.
I guess
Could be a felon.
So defendants, right? People that are in the court system. There are a lot of folks who think that that's really unfair because it gives DAs and courts an incentive, right? Because they depend on that revenue stream to run their offices. So Governor Stitt, to his credit, feels like that's not a good way to do business, and he would like to see his proposal. Rather, it's a little bit different than the Dems. The Dems want to fund the DAs and the courts and give them $40 million apiece. The package that the governor's talking about would send fines and fees to the general revenue fund to be appropriated by the legislature. So DAs and courts would be funded by the legislature, but the fines and fees they collect would go to GR, and the legislature would decide how to spend those dollars. It wouldn't be automatic.
So GR meaning
general revenue fund
into the main fund that they divvy up
into the state's checking account. He's also asking for $10 million to really address mental health and help with reintegration. Again, this is something that the Dems are in favor of. Of note, Senate Minority Leader Senator Kay Floyd, a Democrat of Oklahoma City, she said $10 million, that's great, but if we really want to make a difference, it needs to be about 40 or 50 million. So she says, yes, that's a good proposal, but we need a lot more money. He also would like to enact occupational licensing reform.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting. So right now, if you are a felon, there are many occupations for which you can't be licensed. And what the governor is saying, and what I think most lawmakers support, is like, let's say that you are convicted on a non-violent felony drug charge, and you are an electrician, or maybe you want to be an electrician, you should be able to, once you are out of prison, go through your electrician's apprenticeship, get your hours, take your test, and be licensed as a journeyman electrician, even though you have that felony conviction, because it'd be right. Like even
right.
if it's a drug offense, maybe you shouldn't be a licensed pharmacy technician, but why couldn't you be an electrician, right?
Well, and the deal is they have like these blanket statements or blanket like bans where it's like, if you got a felon, you can't have any of these jobs. When if your felony was to do with something totally unrelated to your job, like, so they kind of want to be like, listen, if you were convicted of a crime that is related to this field, okay, then you probably shouldn't have this job. But like, they don't,
right?
Not everything is translatable.
Yeah, like if your felony conviction is embezzlement, you probably shouldn't be like CPA, right? But like. Right. But there's other things that you could do potentially. He's also looking at creating expedited processes for commuting sentences of drug possession crimes or any other felony that would now be a misdemeanor because of 780 and related legislation or related changes in the law. He also is wanting to see an expedited process to expunge convictions of those that were convicted on drug possession crimes that are now misdemeanors are no longer illegal. This is one of the things that, a lot of people, State Question 780 retroactivity is something that has been, a lot of people have been talking about and kind of wondering why that hasn't been done yet. From what I hear, kind of figuring out how this expungement process would work is one of the things that they're working on. Because there's one camp that says people that are eligible for expungement should have to apply for it. There's another camp that says it should be kind of automatic, and figuring out which one of those we go with is the holdup.
I just want to say that expungement is one of my favorite criminal justice related words. It feels like what's the onomatopoeia? Like a word that feels like it sounds right?
Onomatopoetically sound right. That's a West Wing quote. Golly. I don't know Frumpy, but onomatopoetically sounds right.
Okay. What episode is that from?
So this is one where they're negotiating the summit in Helsinki with the Russians.
Right. Clearly, based on your terrible accent.
Yeah, and they want... Screw off. And then the Russians are asking President Bartlett to wear a coat and gloves. And
Really?
Sam says, we don't want the president to look frumpy.
That's right.
And he says,
That's right.
I don't know frumpy, but onomatopoetically sounds right.
Onomatopoetically.
Yeah, and that sounds like a fucking great accent.
That's,
so you know.
that's I'm gonna have to mark this one as explicit. We've heard several times. We're punchy today. All right. Shiznit, where are we? Oh, so
Expungement.
One of the other things that one of the other articles we'll post on the blog, Scott, is the a point of view that's actually from the speaker, the governor, and I think no, not the speaker. It's from Eccles, Senator David, who's the A&B chair, and the governor. That's about criminal justice reform. And so sometimes legislators will write to the paper and they'll publish it. And this is what they did.
Indeed,
an
op-ed, if you will.
Indeed, point of view, moving on criminal justice reform. So it's good to help kind of just fill in your knowledge about this. And then was that last week? I think last week's episode, maybe this week's episode of Capital Insider, which is the weekly 5-minute. It's a podcast. It's also just on the radio for KGOU, which is the NPR affiliate out of Norman, with Dick Pryor and Capitol reporter Sean Ashley.
You listen to NPR?
Yes.
Freaking liberal.
I don't, I'll be honest. I don't listen as much as I used to because I listen to podcasts all the time.
I was going to say, I used to listen to NPR all the time, and now I just listen to podcasts.
I do too. So every morning I get up and I give the dog a Kong so that he can leave me alone for a few, the puppy. And then I walk in the kitchen and I say, I ask my smart speaker, I will omit her name in case it cues any of our listeners' devices in their house, but I say, Alexa, flash briefing. I'll just say it. Okay, I said it. Sorry, folks, if that screwed up your machine.
Alexa! I won't say anything.
Yeah, flash briefing, which is really handy. And so it tells me 3 things. 1, the weather. 2, on this day from history.com, what happened on this day. It's real quick. It's like a 2-minute thing. Very interesting every day. And then 3, it gives me the NPR morning news briefing.
How does this relate to criminal justice reform?
It doesn't. It's about NPR.
Okay.
It's just a service for our listeners, Scott. I think they should know that this is a function their Alexa device might have. I assume Google also does it. Some kind of flash briefing.
Sure.
Very handy.
Indeed.
Also, just as a plug there, you can actually ask your smart speaker to play Let's Pod This. I know on Alexa it will play via iHeartRadio.
Alexa, play Let's Pod This.
They're already listening to it. It doesn't do any good.
Oh, that's true.
Unless you want to hear the music again. The theme music. Well, we could do that.
There you go.
Just kidding.
God,
okay.
we're so off the rails.
This is what happens when I get excited to record.
Do you have any?
Let's do all the funny things.
Do you have anything else, or can I say the last part of criminal justice reform?
Please proceed.
Yes. House Bill 1269, which would allow sentence modification by the courts. This was a measure that was originally backed by Oklahomans for criminal justice reform. So this allows courts to modify felony sentences to misdemeanors. Mm-hmm. So this is those are the 6 components of the criminal justice reform package that was announced by the governor today. This was met, I think, with pretty positive reaction on both sides of the aisle. I think there's a lot of people that want to see this. I think that there are some people that are and I think this is a reasonable question, why are you coming out with this on May 1st? Why wasn't this a press release for February 20th?
Right. Why did it take so long to do that? I think, here's my 2 cents, which might cost you a nickel. But I think that a lot of the criminal justice reforms we all agree are very important, right? But I think on a large part of the electorate, meaning on most folks who don't ever deal with the courts, they don't have any really awareness of this stuff, and so they don't care about it in the same way. This is honestly, if you're listening to this is probably the nuts and bolts. This is in the weeds of Oklahoma politics, stuff that definitely matters to people, but not like my mom doesn't. She's like, oh, that's important, but it doesn't affect her directly. And I think this is a difficult thing about politics, right? And this is, I don't know, arguably why one of the reasons Let's Fix This exists is to help inform people about some of this stuff that is deeply important to thousands or millions of Oklahomans, but might not be to everybody. It's not as visible as a teacher pay raise, right?
Yeah,
And
I mean,
if you are any regular middle class person who maybe doesn't really have involvement with the courts, why should you care about criminal justice reform?
I would say because, for one thing, if you're someone who has ever woken up at, 5 a.m. on a Christmas morning and it's 25 degrees outside and your furnace doesn't work and you can't find an electrician, right? Or a heat and air tech, this potentially affects you because it allows for more people in the marketplace for certain occupations to compete, right? It allows for, if you are someone whoever is man, I don't mind paying taxes, but I wish that went to things like public schools and roads and bridges. Well, one of the main places that your tax dollars go in Oklahoma is into the criminal justice system, right? Mm-hmm. A huge chunk of every dollar that you spend in taxes goes to a big chunk of it goes into the pockets of the shareholders of private prison corporations, because that's one of the people, those are the people that we employ in Oklahoma to run our prisons. But two, a big chunk of that money generally goes into corrections because we incarcerate so many people.
Yeah.
And the rates of recidivism are so high because we don't adequately rehab folks and we don't treat folks with mental illness and drug addiction. So if you care about how your tax dollars are spent, this affects you, right? If you are someone who wants to see, sorry, you said you were.
I was going to jump in there.
Yeah, do that.
You were rolling. That was good though. I agree. I think, in my opinion, I think this matters to regular everyday folks who maybe don't have involvement with the court system. One, because it's the right thing to do, right? There's humanitarily, this is the right thing to do,
right? The fact that these are human beings, yes, that's morally is yes,
yeah. So there's a moral imperative there, but I think also too, what you said, it hits on the point that this is our tax dollars, and I would wager that most taxpayers would prefer their money go to fix the roads than to incarcerate someone because they had too much weed in their pocket.
I think that you're right. I think though that I think that criminal justice reform, and maybe I'm wrong. I think there's some polling data that would suggest I'm wrong. I think that when you ask someone, I guess the best experience that I can relate to is what I see in my office with parents, mm-hmm. right? I think that the instinct of many parents when their child does something wrong is to punish them, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people, you hear the thing of, right, well, I got spanked and it was fine and it worked. And it's maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I don't know that there's a study that says the reason you didn't do that thing anymore is because you got spanked. Maybe it was. But and sometimes punishment is appropriate, but there's also really, really good evidence-based data that says positive reinforcement is much more effective than negative reinforcement, right? Mm-hmm. It's much easier to teach someone to do the right thing than it is to punish them for doing the wrong thing. You cannot teach, this is true, you cannot teach negative behavior. You cannot teach a person to not do something. You can only teach them how to do something other things, right? And so
this is really speaking to me with my dog right now.
Right. But I think that there's I think that our inclination is to lean towards punishment.
Well, punishment
and
feels
punishment is
right.
Yeah, it feels right? It satisfies the urge we have for, revenge or whatever. Mm-hmm. And again, mm-hmm. I'm not saying if someone if there's a murderer that they shouldn't go to prison, right? That's not the point. But we need to place much more emphasis in our criminal justice system on rehabilitation mm-hmm. than on just kind of feeding this primal urge for punishment.
I think there are just to the reality that there are other options besides just locking somebody up, right? There are other options that might have better outcomes than just locking them up.
Right. And it's not just that there are other outcomes. There are other outcomes that are demonstrably better.
Yes. I agree. All right. Well, we've got just about 5 to 10 minutes left, so let's move on to
we have at least one bill that doesn't matter at all.
We do. Is that the next one?
Yeah.
I think this is a great bill. I'm just kidding. I don't really care.
It's one that I'm 100% in agreement with.
The governor signs the bill to make the ribeye the state steak of Oklahoma.
It is by far the most flavorful cut of beef, in my humble opinion.
Have you tried the Impossible Burger?
I haven't. I probably will at some point.
We should take so they have it at Tucker's.
Yeah.
We should take the dealie and go to do a live pod at Tucker's and eat some burgers.
I would do that. I have nothing like against the Impossible Burger. However, every like piece of burger meat that like you don't eat is a piece of burger meat that I can eat.
Yeah, but
so
I will say again, and I am probably 67% vegetarian by default. My wife is like closer to 90% vegetarian. The Impossible Burger version 2.0 is out now, for one. And if you haven't listened to it, Scott, you should go listen to the Freakonomics. I think it's Freakonomics. Either that or How I Built This about the Impossible Burger. It's fascinating. Also, there's a Freakonomics about bananas that came out recently. And after we finish recording, I'm going to tell you all these facts about bananas. It's amazing. Anyway, the Impossible Burger, it is so meat-like that my wife won't eat it because it weirds her out. Because it has the heme, so it's like red and kind of bloody.
I've heard multiple people say like I know multiple vegetarians that won't eat it because it's so meaty.
Right. That's my nickname in college, meaty.
Where's the sad trombone sound?
Oh, it's right here.
There it is.
And so, but yeah, we should do the live pod at Tucker's. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Can we like buy a real burger and an Impossible Burger and like split them?
Oh, yes, we can. That's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Listeners, if you would like to join us for a live podcast at Tucker's sometime the next month, please email us at podcast@letsfixthisok.org or hit us up on Twitter.
God, their shakes are so good.
Ooh, they do have a banana pudding shake right now as well.
Oh.
Also on Mondays are shake days. It's like half price or something.
I don't have lunch. I'm getting hungry. Okay.
All right. And so then speaking of vetoes, as we did earlier, Stitt vetoed several bills this week. Hunting.
He is like not afraid to wield the veto pen.
I think
Like,
proportionally it's
Getting after it.
he's vetoed like not I don't know, a dozen or so out of several hundred that he signed. It's not I think proportionally it's fine.
No, I'm not saying it's like a problem. I'm just like I think it would be easy given his like lack of political experience, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But no, he's for a guy that never voted, he's really solid wielding the
point.
veto, wielding the veto pen.
Well, and as I said earlier, from my observations and what I've heard, a lot of the things he's vetoed are things that he's like, no, I don't want to sign that because I want to do it myself, and he's gonna figure out he can't do everything. For one, he has a ton of positions that are not filled right now. Like you mentioned, the Senate confirmation. They're, from what I understand, they are like bare bones staff in the governor's office. They can barely stay afloat each day.
Well, and he made. I think we'll talk about this more maybe next week. He made some appointments to the State Board of Ed this week that are meeting some opposition.
That was a weird deal. We should talk about that next week. Yeah. I've had some thoughts about that. Anyway, this week there were like 4 bills, and real quick, one of them was to allow hunting guides on publicly managed land, not necessarily publicly owned land. He vetoed that, said, nope, can't do that because we don't own the land. He vetoed a mechanism to certify new police and firefighter unions. That is not totally unsurprising, disappointing for those folks, of course. There was a veto that I don't totally understand about instructional expenditure. Basically, he just said he didn't want to define instructional expenditure in that way
because it would differ from the federal definition of instructional expenditure.
That makes sense.
And it would make it impossible for us to report instructional expenditures in a way that would allow us to meaningfully compare our instructional expenditures to other states.
That's a reasonable thing then. I mean, this is basically like teachers spending their own money on things for the classroom.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. And then also he vetoed one. This is probably the biggest and most contentious, and that is a bill that would allow low-paid state employees. So, like right now, if you're a state employee, you can in most cases, you can either get overtime or you get compensatory time, comp time, and many agencies like kind of force you to take comp time, which is what happens in my job. Sometimes we take comp time instead, but in some state jobs, you have to take it as comp time. So if you work, over 40 hours a week, it has to go with comp time. But then you're so overburdened, you never get to like actually take time off work to use that comp time. And this bill would change that and basically say, like, you have to pay the lowest paid workers, you have to pay them overtime. And he vetoed that for some reasons. He's like, basically we should form a commission and we should look at that and let me fix that. Which, again, maybe not the best idea, but time will tell. All right, Scott, that brings us to the end of everything. Do you have any final thoughts this week?
I'm ready for session to be over.
We're almost there, man.
Is that bad?
Gotta hold
Like I usually,
on
I'm not like
we've got.
I'm not like anti-session, but we were in session until like September.
Yeah.
And then we had elections.
What are we gonna do?
And then like
year?
session started again, and I'm just like I'm not like tired of like prepping for the show, but I think there's a lot of things that we can talk about, and like I'm ready to like kind of try and do a deep dive into some different things without having to like spend all of our time every week like, well, what did they do or not do it? What did they do or not do at 23rd and Lincoln this week?
Right.
Like,
yeah. So
like
we've talked about this, that we've kind of got some ideas for the off season here.
Yeah, like get in, do some interviews, go on the road, maybe like take a deep dive into some like aspects of Oklahoma governance that maybe you don't think about but affect you very deeply.
Yeah.
County government is so interesting, and we like never get to talk about it because we're always talking about the ledge.
We even
city government, like,
and well, Scott, we've even discussed the idea that while we tend to focus, and this has kind of been our bread and butter, is focusing on the state level stuff. This will be the first presidential election cycle that we've been around since Let's Fix This.
Yeah, baby.
Well, I mean, we kind of started in 2016, but like not really, not the podcast.
Yeah.
And so we've even talked about trying to interview some of these candidates that are running for president, right?
We're working on some things.
We'll see. We'll ask some folks whether or not they say yes to a obscure local politics podcast.
I've got an email into the White House communications office.
Have you already sent it?
Not yet.
We'll ask.
Obscure local podcast would like to interview President Trump.
Listen, if Trump decides to come on the podcast via phone, we will have at least 7 listeners that week. I guarantee. Perhaps even as many as 500.
Not just the 2.
So, not the 19 million that My Favorite Murder gets each month.
But insane. $19 million. You know what we could do with $19 million a month?
Laugh a lot. I would also perhaps run a commercial or two. So anyway, all right. Well, again, as a reminder that tomorrow night is a night to remember, a prom for adults. It's our spring fundraiser this year. We'll probably have a fundraiser this fall as well. Something involving bourbon.
If you had a terrible time at your prom, or you had a great time at your prom, or you just skipped it because it was lame, you should
definitely come.
You should take this opportunity for either a repeat or a do-over.
That's right. We're going to have all the things you imagined. Cheesy photos, prom court sashes arrived at my house a little while ago. I got the notification. It's going to be a great time. Snacks, drinks, dancing. I've sent a great playlist of 80s and 90s hits over there, some 2000s, a wide range. Don't forget to subscribe and rate our podcast. If you haven't told your friends about it, please do. Tell them this is a great way to stay involved and at least informed about what happens in your state government. We try to cast a broad net, and I feel like it's helpful. Don't you?
We hope so.
We hope so. Don't forget to sign up for our email list at letsfixthisok.org. You can also become a member of Let's Fix This, a real fixer. You get a membership card and a sticker and a button and all kinds of things. You can do that at our website as well, letsfixthisok.org. And just remember that Let's Fix This is Did the music end? I hit the wrong button. Son of a gun. This has never happened before, Scott. Scott's looking at his phone. I hit the intro instead of the outro.
Jeez.
What's wrong with me?
Epic fail.
Why are there 2 buttons?
Epic fail.
Anyway. Let's Just Fix This is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization who strives to educate and equip all Oklahomans to engage their government. If that's you, if you're an Oklahoman who wants to engage the government and you'd like outros that don't end, hit us up on email, podcast@letsfixthisok.org. On Twitter, Scott is at SCMelson. I am at AndyOKC. Or just hit us up on our general account at letsfixthisok.org. We will see you next week.
We'll be here.